All right, what's up everyone? This is Don with Third Creative, and this is the walkthrough tutorial video for Forged Multi-Sport Photoshop Template. If you have not watched any of my tutorial videos before, this is where I very thoroughly go through all of the layers, all the details, processes, and hopefully by the end I've covered anything and everything that you could possibly need to know in order to use this template and create the best images possible. Before we jump into it, a couple things I want to touch on. You can see here all the files and ratios that this bundle includes, which is all the usual, the norm. But there's a couple extras in this one, which I'm hoping you guys will like. First being a customizable schedule template that's included. Basically, it's a drag and drop into any template file that you want, whether it's this template or any other. It is layered, so you can change all of the text. You can change the team logos. We'll get into it a little more thoroughly later in this video when we get to that. The other is Photoshop Action that you can download and install that will make it easier for you to apply this motion blur effect if you decide you want to use it. That may depend on the size of the job or personal taste, but you can see what an image looks like without it versus with it, and you can decide which look you like best. And if you want to use the action, it will make life a little bit easier for you, taking some of those steps out. So we'll jump into that and explain how to install it and how to use it. And then the other thing is just looking at the sample images. I wanted it to be a true multi-sport template. It was originally created for football, so it had the outdoor stadium lights with the clouds. But on the left, you can see here, even though it's very subtle, we've got an indoor lighting option. You can see subtle rafters up here. So it should cover just literally about anything and everything. And then, of course, I wanted to show some different sports, some different color schemes, just give you an idea of some of the possibilities of what the looks you can create are. Let's get into this thing. I think we'll start off with the Photoshop Action, because I feel like that's the first thing you're going to want to do is just get that installed once you have everything downloaded. So if I can get that pulled up here, this is all the files you'll see that come with your download, and then you'll see this .atn. This is your Photoshop Action. So just know where to find that, everything that you've downloaded. It originally goes to your downloads folder, which you probably already know that, and you can put it all in a folder and move it to any location on a internal or external hard drive, wherever you keep it. Just know where it's at, so that once you're in Photoshop you can install it. Now I have my actions right here. Most of you probably know where your actions are, but if you're not using actions or this is new to you, come up to Window, click on the word actions, and it will make sure that it's added into your toolbar like this. Now I've already got the motion blur in here, and I think it might let me delete it. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. So we're going to pretend I didn't have it, and right here in this little 3-line icon, if you click on that, there's an import actions option. So we're going to click on that, and you may need to navigate to where the action file is. It just popped up for me because I was there just before, but you select the action file, hit open, and it likes to put it down here. I'm sure there was a way to avoid that, but don't just click it and let go, because it'll try to run it, but click and drag and just put it wherever you want it. So if it does that, now it's in there. So let's collapse that. We'll come back to that when it's time. Let's get into the actual Photoshop template itself, how it's built, how to use it. I always encourage you to kind of get familiar with the layer structure. Things look nice and tidy, simple. There's not a lot here. You can click on each one, see where everything is. It's not until you open up some of these folders where you see everything that's going on here. So I'm going to start with this very bottom background layers folder, which you can see there's quite a bit in here, but I'll explain all of it. Something that is different about this design is that this very bottom color overlay layer. This is normally where I would set it up for you to be able to change the background color. I won't go into a thorough explanation, but long story short, these embers down here, I used layer, let's see, a blend mode of screen, and I just noticed that when I was changing some of the colors of the embers, that the edges were showing up, and you know, I thought about trying to mask out all the edges, and I just decided, you know what, there's a better way. And so if you want to introduce color to the background, it's all the way up here and it's turned off. So by default, it's just going to be this dark gray. We've got some color grading that's making it warm, but you can see if I turn that off. If you want to add the color, you would turn this layer on right here, and by default it's this bluish color, but just double click on this color overlay icon. You're probably already familiar with this, but you've got your slider. You can kind of navigate around to get the right hue. Once you get in the general ballpark, you can play around with how light or how dark or how saturated or desaturated it is, and you can find, you know, the color that's just right. And the good thing is as you continue to customize it, if you feel like it's still off a little bit, you just come back and play with it a little bit more until you get it just right. So that's how you would change the background color. The next layer is the vertical edge text. So it's this nice script font. It says Bulldogs. You probably already know how to edit text, but this T icon, if you double click it, it's going to highlight all of it. And then you can just type in whatever your team name is or whatever you want it to say. So I'm going to put Leopards, and that's a local team that I shoot for. We'll hit the check mark to commit it. Now here you can leave it as it is if it looks good, or you can click on any of these little icons on the boundary here to scale it. I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm just going to click and drag up to make it a little bit bigger. I can click inside, move it around. I like it to run off just a little bit, maybe something like that. But you get the idea. That's how you would just change what it says, scale it, position it so that it looks good to you. Now, you can change the color of the text up here in like properties right here, in your character panel. You can see right here, your contextual toolbar. Nope, that does not have it anymore, but if you double click on it up here at the very top, you could change the color. So you may want to do that. Something I realized after the fact, once I made all these sample images, I realized I never changed the color, but the color of the other layers kind of bled onto it and affected the color. So there is a very good chance you won't need to even change the color of it, but you can if it makes your image look better. Next, we have a film grain layer, and this is a smart object, and I used the blur gallery to add grain. It is a smart object, so if you zoom in a little bit, you can see this grain. If I turn it off, it really smooths out. So it's up to you whether you want to keep it on or off. I like the grainy look that it gives, but if you feel like it's too much, you could come up and reduce the opacity. It's at 100%. You could reduce it down to a lower level to get a little more subtle effect. Totally up to you. The next layer we have is an upper light source. If I turn it off, you can kind of see at the very top, it just kind of looks like some light shining down. I use a hair light, and on him in particular, it's very prominent, and so I wanted to have kind of a directional light source option coming from the top. Now you'll notice the opacity is only at 30%, so if you want it to be more prominent, you can go all the way up to 100, or if you just don't want it at all, you can turn it off. Totally up to you. The next layer that we have is a fog behind subject. If I turn it off, you can see it kind of darkens up behind the subject. If I turn the subject off, you can see it a little bit better. I have a gradient layer mask just so that it would kind of fade towards the bottom. So if I hold down Shift and click on the layer mask, you can see what it looks like. Hold down Shift, click on it again to reapply the layer mask. You could play with the opacity. It's only at 20%. You could also click on any of these anchor points, scale it up, scale it down, move it around, just depending on what looks good. We'll turn our subject back on and move on to the next layer folder that we have here, which is our outdoor stadium lights. If I turn it on, you can see there's 2 layers, so you can move these around. When you activate them, it looks a little weird, but once you hit the check mark, it goes back. So if you want to play with the placement of those, you can, or scale them larger or smaller. You have the option to do that. I'm going to close that up. You don't typically need to adjust the color. However, you can with this hue saturation adjustment layer that's clipped to this folder. So if you double click on that icon, it should bring up your properties, and you can use this slider to adjust the color. And if the color you choose is just it just pops too much, you can play with these other sliders. You can reduce or even increase the saturation. You probably don't want to get too carried away with the lightness and darkness, but you have the option to tweak the color of it just a little bit if you want to. Now, if you're not shooting or creating for an outdoor sport, you would just turn this layer folder off completely and come up to the one above it, which is our indoor arena lights. If I turn that on, you can see we've got our rafters, we've got more indoor lighting, a little bit of fog. It's got a layer inside here with the gradient mask, but it's the same thing. It's got the hue saturation adjustment layer that's clipped to it. By double clicking on it, you'll get your properties where you can play around with the saturation or the hue. You can dial it in. We'll turn that off. Go back to our outdoor. Next we have our lower embers. So if I open it up, there's two images here that are both set to screen. I had a hard time choosing between screen and lighten, and maybe this one will be a better example. So it's on screen. If I go with lighten, you can see that you lose some of that glow effect, which may be a good thing. It just depends on the color that you have, but I like the little bit of the glow to be included, so I went with screen. You can move these around if you want to, play with them, scale them, rotate them, whatever. You always have that option, but it should be pretty much good to go like it is, but you might want to adjust the color. So just like the background lights, it's got a hue saturation adjustment layer that's clipped to this layer folder. So if you select it, click on this icon, again, you'll get your properties window. And again, it's this top slider. You can move it left, move it right. And if that extra haze or glow isn't working for you, you can come down here and just see what it looks like by switching to lighten. Again, it may or may not look better, but it's an option that I'll figure out throw out there. Let's undo that. Okay, keeping it moving. Now we already talked about introducing color with this. Just turn it on, click on the icon, pick the color. You can always come back later and adjust it if you need to. But the next and final layer or layers that are in the background layers folder is the border color bleed layers. So if I turn it off, you can see pretty significant impact that these layers have on the image. Now, more often than not, you want both of the left and the right side to be the same color. And so you would just click on this color overlay that's on the layer folder itself. You'll get your layer style panel. You'll see this icon, click on it, and just find the color that looks good. And again, if once you work on it a little bit more, you think it could be better, just come back to it. But that's very simple. If you wanted to have them independently, you could turn this off on the layer folder itself, and then each one has its own, and so you could make one side different if you want to. And just like any of the other layers, you can scale them larger, smaller, move them up, down, move them around, play around with it, but more than likely they should be set up just how you need them. And that is it for the background layers. Let's close it up. Next, we have our subject image folder. All right, so this is where our Photoshop action is going to come into play. Now, I went ahead and left some things here so you can kind of see how I set it up for this sample image. I'm going to turn this drop shadow on. So with the motion blur effect behind it, I thought this little drop shadow looked good just to create some separation. It's personal taste. It might look different with different subjects, different sports, different lighting. You get the idea, but you might consider that. But let's just pretend that we've put our own subject in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down Option or Alt on PC, but I'm on a Mac, so it's Option, and I'm going to click and drag up to duplicate it, and we'll turn these off. So let's pretend we just put our subject in here, and I'm going to right click and clear the layer style and everything. So it's just the subject. So from here, you could hold down Alt or Option, click and drag down to duplicate. You can right click and convert it to a smart object. And then you could steal these layer effect and smart filters from the ones that were already in there. So I could click and drag this drop shadow to my top subject, and then I could click and drag these smart filters from this layer for the sample subject to the new one that I made into a smart object. Now if you click on these little arrows here, you can open them up and you can see that those effects have applied. That is one way to do it. And of course you can make any other adjustments that you want to, if you want to add curves or saturation or whatever you want to do. That's one way to do it. But another way is, let's just delete all of that and let's clear the layer style and pretend we just, no, that didn't work. What do I do? Copy, clear layer style. Okay, so now we just have our subject in here. We have nothing. So to add the motion blur, you go to your actions, and you already know this much. Click on motion blur and let it do its thing. Now I did not make it where it adds a drop shadow to your top subject, so it's up to you if you want to add that or not, but the action will give you the motion blur. That's how you would just add it yourself. So very simple, very straightforward. Using the action hopefully will save you a little bit of time. For those of you who are automation wizards, I'm sure you can come up with some sort of script or something that will apply it to a batch. But that's it. You would drop your subject images into this folder, scale and position them how you want. Like most of my templates, there is a gradient layer mask on this folder, and so that is going to fade the lower portion of your subject into 0 opacity, so you don't see the legs running off of the bottom. There are occasions where you may want to adjust this layer mask, and I'm being super thorough here, but this one right here was one where I wanted that layer mask to really come up high. Just gives the appearance of like an atmosphere or haze that's kind of wrapping around the subject, but all it is making him a little more transparent by stretching that out. So if you've watched previous tutorial videos, you've already seen how this is done, but I've been just explaining it on all of them. If you select this layer mask, go to your gradient tool, which is this icon right here. If you come up here, click on this, make sure that you have black to white or white to black. Make sure that it's linear, which is this icon right here. Make sure your opacity is all the way up. Now you could have reverse checked or not. Either way, you'll figure out which direction is which. But once you have that set up and you have that layer mask selected, all you have to do is click and drag from where you want it to start to where you want it to end. If you let go and you don't like that, click on an anchor point, drag it up, drag it down, angle it. If you want it perfectly straight, hold down Shift. It'll kind of lock it into place. You can do the same thing with the bottom one. You can make it as abrupt or as gradual as you want it to be. And that is all there is to it. That is a technique that applies to much more than the subject image folder. It applies to anything that you want to fade into opacity. It comes into play when you're building rows of your team images or your subjects. You often will have to tweak or fine-tune these gradient masks. So it's a good tool to have in your tool bag. Next, we've got our lower text layers. Let's open it up. So here we've got our first name, and if I double click on it, you can type in any name you want, or you can use automation. It is right oriented, so it should always start right here and work its way towards the center, and the same thing for the last name. Now, we've already touched on this, but anytime you have a text layer selected, you can come up to your properties, you can come up to your character panel, and you can change the color to anything you want. I think I use white on all of my sample images for the first name. But you have the option to change the color. Same thing with the last name. The last name is also right oriented, so it's going to start over here and work its way from right to left. So if I type in Anderson, you can see how that works. So you could always select these layers, and if you don't want them starting so far over, you can move them in. You can move them up, down, move them around. You have the option to set that up how you want it to. Here we have an optional highlight on the last name. So I used to actually set color up on these last names with a gradient overlay, and that was just too much for some people, which I understand. So I started adding this little I've got it set to overlay. It could be to soft light. I like, the way it looks with overlay. It pops a little bit more. But if you turn it off, you can see it's just a flat, solid color. If you turn it on, it just kind of gives the appearance of kind of an upper light source hitting it, and kind of a gradient effect. Now the opacity is at 50%, so just like a lot of these layers, you can adjust it to 100 or to anywhere in between, or you can turn it off if you don't want it on there at all. Next, we have some subtext lines. Now, I've got this long line, and all that is these hyphens running into each other. Or so I've got them set up for senior, junior, sophomore, freshman. If you use it that way, you can change it. Like, for example, this was like a travel volleyball team, so I put the Fusion Gold there. You can have it say anything, position, whatever you wanted to, totally up to you. But if you wanted to change it, you would double click it, and then you would just want to select just the word portion and start typing over that. Another thing you'll notice is that portion has kerning adjusted, so the space in between each letter is at 1,000. And any text layer, you can play around with those values. The greater the value, the more space in between the text, or the characters, I guess you would say. And that's it for the name text layers. There's a subfolder in here for lower team label layers. So I turn that off. You can see it's this little label here that I created. I thought it was a nice little accent, nice little touch. A lot of this is pretty self-explanatory. I left this, it just says Dog Pride. I didn't label it. I didn't know what to call it, but it could be anything, their team name, a slogan, or anything that you want. Or you could even turn it off. Totally up to you. Here, it says Bulldog Football. You would probably change this. And so let's just, for example, say that it's Bulldog Cheer. Now, I misspelled cheer, so you don't want to do that. But you can always go back and fix it like I'm about to do. So now I've got Bulldog Cheer, and you notice it doesn't fill up all of this space. Now you could make the text larger if you want to, so that it fills up the space. You could leave it just as it is, but if you really want it to fill up the space like it did with Bulldog Football, with this layer selected, come up to your character panel, and in this, I think that's a V and an A, but this is for kerning, and we just talked about this. Play with the values. It's at 200. Let's see what 350 looks like. I'm going to type in 350, hit enter. That's pretty close. I could leave it at that, or I could keep going. We could try 365, getting a little closer. We don't need all that. There we go. We could do 375. And if hit enter, we can move it down. You get the idea. You can make it look just right if you want to take the time to do it. Next, we have our sample team logo. So if I turn that off, you see it's just a little spot for a logo. There's a few where I turn this off, and what I did is I just duplicated the year, and then I clicked on one of these little anchors, held down shift, slide it over, and then I type something in. And just so you can see an example, right here, 18 gold, that's a logo. Here I have cheer. Here I've got a logo. So you have all the freedom in the world to either replace the logo with your team's logo or put anything you want in there. Here we have the year. So for a few more months, 2026 will be fine. You won't have to touch it, but you can of course double click, change it to any year, and if you wanted to say something else, you can do that as well. This subfolder is actually the frame layer, so it's color overlay set to white. If you want to change it, double click the word color overlay and you can change it to anything. But the structure is made up of two layers. We've got an outer frame. If I turn it off, you can see, and then we've got this little frame divider, which is right in the middle. You could duplicate the divider and you could make 3 sections. You can space these out however you want. It's really small, so you might have to zoom in. There we go. But you can make 3 sections and put 3 things in here. Like I had a Nike swoosh symbol because they were sponsored by Nike and they wanted it and it was legal. But I didn't want to put that in the template, but it's a nice extra touch. So this thing is fully customizable. You can play with it, have fun, make it look cool. Or keep it as simple as you possibly can or want to. I think that about covers everything with these text layers. The one thing that I'll add to it is I've got this grunge texture clipped to the folder itself, so you can see if I zoom in, it's applying a little bit of grunge to all of this, just a little bit of texture. So you can see what it looks like without it. Just kind of smooths everything out. All right, we're getting there. Last folder at the very top is optional color grading layers. If I open it up, there's 3 things going on here, and I'll explain all of them. They all work very similarly. The first thing is that I have a color overlay. It's set to soft light, and gosh, I'm gonna have to lean forward. 8% is what it's set at, so very minimal, and it's at an orange color, but if you turn it off, you'll see we lose some of that orange warmth. If I turn it back on and start to increase, you can see, like if I go to 100%, you can see what it does. It doesn't look good. So finding the right opacity amount, pretty important. There's 10%, but also remembering that this works not just for warm. So if you play around with this, you can go warm. Green starts to look weird, but there might be some scenarios where it looks cool. But you can go the opposite direction with it and start to get in the cooler colors. And it does add a little bit of contrast to your subjects. So if they're not too contrasty to begin with, it can be a nice touch or bonus. But that's how that works. It's basically choosing the color, choosing the level of opacity. Now, I also have these color lookups or LUTs, and it's very similar. It's only at 10%. This one is an optional warm contrast. So if I turn it off, you see we lose some of the warmth and some of the contrast. And if you increase it to 100%, it can get way out of hand. So just like this one, choose the right amount of opacity. And if you would rather go with the cool option, you can turn it off and turn this cool contrast option on. You can see if I turn it on and off, and again, you can adjust the opacity to your liking. Some scenarios I had all 3 turned on. It just depends on what you're creating and what looks good. But you can use any combination of these and adjust them however you think looks best. But that's how all of that works. So what's next? We need to talk about the schedule template option and demonstrate how that works. So let me get that pulled up. All right, so you can see that I've pulled up the schedule template, and when you pull it up, it should look like this. And so basically on the layer panel, I have one folder, and then I have a color fill, and I put the color fill in here just so in case you want to work on customizing it before you add it to another document or file. Having this background color allows you to see what's going on. If you turn it off, you can see that's kind of hard to work with. So if you want to add it to another file, I have this one pulled up. Now you have the option to come up to, what is it, window, arrange, we'll do 2 up horizontal. Actually that works, but also I think vertical. Either way, you can see both at the same time. But really all there is to it is just clicking, like making sure you're on the right document first, but clicking the schedule, drag, drop. Now I could do window, arrange, and tile up, and what is it? There we go. But let me go ahead and explain that you don't have to do all of that if you don't want to. That just allows you to see it. You could be over here, click and drag, hold it over this tab, bring it down, let go. So more than one way to do it. So now it's at the very top, which actually works out perfectly. I'm going to turn off these others, and I'm going to bring this down. I'm going to hold down the shift button. I'm going to click this anchor point, scale it up a little bit larger. You can kind of move it around, get it close. A little trick that I use all of the time on your keyboard. If you're on Mac, it's Command Control for Windows. Hold it down and then hold down A at the same time. It selects your entire canvas, and as long as you have the Move tool selected here, you'll see these. And this one right here centers horizontally. So I'm going to click that, and you'll see it just move well, it'll be pretty noticeable, but it'll center it perfectly. Now I'm going to hit Control or Command and D to deselect, and now it's perfectly centered, and all I have to do is use my up and down arrow keys in order to move it. So that's how you can drag and drop it into a template or another image. If you want to customize it, which I'm sure you will, you can do it here, or you can wait until it's in the actual template, whichever works for you. But for the demonstration, I'm just going to show it here. I'm going to open up this folder. You've got your upper text line, and so we kind of talked about how you would do this. It can say whatever you want. I have 2026 Bulldog football season schedule, but if you type something else and it's not as long or it's too long, again, this is a scenario where you would probably come up to the kerning and adjust the space in between the letters so that it takes up the right amount of space that you want it to. It has an outer glow, which you can turn off if you just want it to be nice and clean. When I created their schedule poster last year, I had the outer glow on there. It looked really nice with this template. So that's totally up to you. In fact, all of this has an outer glow attached to it. So you see these two subfolders. We can turn all the outer glow off if you want to go with a cleaner look. All right, so you can customize that just double clicking here, typing over it. Pretty simple and straightforward. Here I've got team logos. So I wasn't sure exactly the best way to set this up, but if I open it up, I just merged them all into one. So I turn that off because these are all samples. You're going to have to get rid of them anyways. So you can go ahead and put your team logos in this folder, scale and position them in each of these sections for the respective game that the opponent logo needs to line up with, if that makes sense. I do have a couple of adjustment layers clipped to this folder. One is the desaturate option. And so I think the desaturate option more often than not looks best. Once you have all kinds of color, different logos, it can be a little busy, but not always. There's no right or wrong. It's just what looks best. But I think often it will look best if it's all desaturated. And so if I turn that off, you can see we get all the color back in these logos. So that's up to you whether you want it to desaturate or not to. Also, I put a levels adjustment clip to it so that you can control the contrast. If I turn that off, you can see it's a lot more kind of washed out. I did that just to make it a little more bold and prominent. So you can turn it on, you can turn it off. You can double click the icon if you're not familiar with levels adjustments. It's kind of like curves for dummies. That might be offensive to some of you, but I use levels often, so maybe that makes me a dummy. But the left anchor point here controls your darks, so you can slide it left, slide it right, see what looks good. The middle one is your midtones, that makes sense. Left and right, see what looks good. And the one on the right is your brights or lights. And you just slide them around until it looks good. And it's as simple as that. Next, we have our schedule blocks. So let's open this up. And we've got subfolders, pretty self-explanatory. Game 1, Game 2, Game 3, Game 4, etc. It goes all the way to 10. Now, I wish there was a way to make it easy, depending on how many games you need to have in here, but without making this thing monstrous, there's really not. So if you need more than 10 games, you just need to duplicate some of these layers. So I'm going to click on game 10, and I'm going to hold down Option or Alt, and I'm just going to click and drag till you see this little blue line and duplicate it. So game 10 has been duplicated. Now I can click on this anchor point, hold down Shift, click inside the box anywhere, and move it over. So we're going to eyeball it, get it where we think it looks good. Now that's just adding one team. You can repeat this process. If you run out of room, select the entire folder and the team logos folder, both of them together. So if you don't know how to do that, click on one layer, hold down Command or Control and click on the other layer that you want to select. Now you've got it all selected. Now you can click on these anchors, hold down Shift, center it. You could scale it down, scale it up if you need to make more room. You just got to play with it depending on how many games that you want. But when you open up any of these, it's pretty straightforward. This one says away. You could easily change that to say home. So you go through and figure out which ones are home and away and make sure that they all line up. Next, we've got 3 letters for the month, and then the layer below it is for the date. Pretty simple. And all of these are text layers. We've already talked about it. If you want to change color of text layers, you can just highlight them. And this is one where you probably want to, when you pick a color, you want to copy this code so that you can just paste it in to all of them. You may want some of them, the home to be one color, you may want the away to be a different color, all kinds of scenarios. There's still some work involved in this, obviously, but at least this gives you a good starting point, a good structure to get you going. And that's it, I hope. So we've talked about the Photoshop action. We've talked about all the layers in the template itself. We talked about the schedule file, how to drag and drop it, how to customize it. If I have overlooked anything, or if you're stuck on anything at all, let me know. Shoot me an email, don@thirdcreative.com. I stay busy, but I always try to help when I can and return messages when I get them. So don't hesitate to reach out. That is all for this one. Nice, long, lengthy one, like they always are. But until the next one, thank you for watching, and we will see you.